Ya Ali Madat and welcome. Today is November 17th, 2020, 8 p.m. Pacific Standard Time. Dr. Hassam will be speaking about the Pyramid of Faith, the journey from Shariat to Marifat, part 3 of 4. In Islam, faith has many levels of participation, transformation, and realization. In this 4-part series, Dr. Hassam will define the 4 fundamental levels, namely Shariat, Tariqat, Hakikat, which will be tonight, and Marifat, and explain the relationship amongst them. Understanding these levels and their interconnectedness allows the believer to gain clarity and make progress on their journey towards Marifat. We will now have Rosmeen or Rosie Nanji recite Bamar Gufa Upar Dekanta by Sayyid Muhammad Shah. The verses are 1 to 4. At this time, Rosie, I will ask you to recite the translation and then start the Ginan.
O brothers and sisters, let me know the quality of bliss when seeing the divine light with the inner eyes during Ibadat at the Bamar Gufa. You will see the glowing light glittering, and the thing which is seen is a divine light indeed. Verse number 2. O believers, have patience, and everything can be achieved through patience alone, because the fruits are not grown without a season, if the gardener waters the true plant 100 times. Verse number 3. O brothers, you must know the Shariat by considering it true, so that Tariqat is sought at once. And rooting the Hakikat within the heart, the way of Marifat is finally achieved. Verse number 4. Sayyid Muhammad Shah makes submission. O Lord, please pay attention to my submission that your slave is sinful, and be so kind as to forgive all the sins. Echi Bamar Gufa Upar Dekhanta Bai kaho kaisa guna hoya jaga maga jota jala hale ane vasta nora ni soya eji diro re bai mo mano ane dire te saba kucha hoya malire sinche so gana bai ruta bina fala na hoya eji shariyata haka kari jari tora tatari kata paye hakikata dila Muhammad Shah aankhein ve nanti tame sambaro raba satar ye bando gone gar hai saya bakshiye bakshan har.
MashaAllah. Thank you very much, Rosamine. I appreciate it. At this time, we will call upon Dr. Hassam to start the session.
Yali Madad Nayab.
Mullah Ali Madad.
And Yali Madad to all the other co-hosts and helpers. And Yali Madad this evening to all the participants for this third part of the Pyramid of Faith. As I begin, I would like to, first of all, say congratulations to Rosamine Nanji for wonderful selection of the Ginan. And one of our host or co-hosts have assisted in the selection of these verses, which is absolutely befitting to the talk this evening. You can see from these verses of the Ginan that how in this particular case, Sayyid Imam Shah, Sayyid Muhammad Shah, basically refers to the four stages of the faith as the Shariat, the Tariqat, the Hakikat, and the Marifat. And in those references, it is just amazing how Sayyid Muhammad Shah here connects the four stages and instructs the Jamaat through his example of humility, how one reaches the final stage of Marifat, which will be the presentation for next week. So thank you, Rosamine, for your participation this evening. Mullah bless you for your seva. And Mullah bless all the hosts and co-hosts, and Mullah bless all the participants for being here this evening. The subject today, as already announced, is the Hakikat. But before we get into this definition of the Hakikat, I left a little bit to be completed about the Tariqat in the last lecture. We had to shorten the lecture because Betul Kial Sataro was on most appropriately. And therefore, today I'd like to complete that part and then come into the Hakikat. And for that purpose, I'm going to ask Nayab to read the roadmap. Now you remember what I said to you last week. This is a roadmap which is drawn by our holy imams in the sacred Pandiyat. And this roadmap that is drawn by the holy imam, Imam Shah Mustansir Billah Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam, our beloved 32nd imam. And as before Nayab reads it, I just like to say an observation or two, that remember, dear listeners, members of the Jamaat, my brothers and sisters, remember that the perspective that I'm taking is the perspective of our tariqah. That is why I'm showing you this roadmap. I have also mentioned to you last week and the week before that each one of these stages has multiple layers, and I did not go through all the layers in any particular stage because it would require lectures just to finish one stage. But since our aim is focused more specifically on the objective of our tariqah, one necessarily must give the whole picture and the whole framework of this roadmap. And when I say it is a roadmap, I am seeking to give you some reflection on each one of these stages and eventually see the connection and the interrelationship, just as the Ginan of Sayyid Muhammad Shah mentioned by saying that look at the tariqat, accept it as true, and look how the tariqat is achieved by virtue of the fact that there is a shariat. So the shariat is the truth that one has to accept, which takes you to the notion of the tariqat, and you follow the tariqat, and I've explained that last week, but I will say a few words in a minute. And then you are led into this hakikat, and the Ginan says, you may have seen that word there, it says nakshiye. A different meaning to that, but in this particular case, it means that let the hakikat take root. In other words, let the hakikat be imprinted, solidly imprinted, engraved onto your heart. And if this hakikat becomes engraved into your heart, it will open the doors of marifat. So I will let Nayab read this first, and then we will continue.
Thank you, Dr. Hassam. The real believer, Momin, is one from the observance of the rules of Shariat, arrives at the following of the rules of Tariqat, and from the latter to Hakikat, which is the real inner meaning of Shariat. Shariat may be compared to a candle, Tariqat to the path, and Hakikat to the destination, manzil. One must strive to walk along the correct path, lit by the candle, and be able to reach the abode, khana, of Hakikat. The foundation of Hakikat is to recognize the Imam. The purpose, maqsood, of everything is its inner meaning, batin, which forms its real substance, its essence and sweetness. Therefore, the ultimate purpose of the Shariat introduced by the Prophet was its inner meaning, batin, which was hakikat, the recognition of the Imam of the time.
Thank you, Nayab. So once again, for those who may have perhaps just joined us at this stage, and to re-emphasize to all the listeners, this explanation by the Holy Imam is so important if we are to benefit from the understanding of what is these various stages. Because remember, the importance of these stages is that if you intend to rise to a level whereby there is spiritual enlightenment and spiritual progress, then you have to connect these four stages together: the Shariat, the Tariqat, the Hakikat, and the Marifat. And you can see from this explanation given by the Imam, and if you look at the last paragraph, you can see my cursor, it says that the ultimate purpose of the Shariat introduced by the Holy Prophet was the inner meaning, the batin, which was the Hakikat. And Hakikat, which is what we are speaking about today, is the recognition of the Imam of the time. Now, as we move into these different phases, let me just add some observation. What is the significance then of going from the Shariat to the Tariqat and then achieving the Hakikat, which is the recognition of the Imam of the time. So first, I want to say that to you, just as it says in the Ginan, if you engrave the hakikat, if you make the hakikat the purpose in your heart, if you make the hakikat the root in your heart, then marifat will open up. And you can see when I'm saying to you, make hakikat the root in your heart, as it was said in the Holy Ginan, it means make the recognition of the Imam in your heart the root of things. The love, the devotion, the recognition of the Imam. You see, if you miss this point, then it simply becomes an academic meaning and definition. It doesn't take you anywhere. It's okay. You will know in your mind, you may know in your thinking what it is. But that is not the objective of my presentation. As I have often said, I am specifically concerned about what our Satpant Dharam, what Shia Imami Ismaili Islam gives meaning to the meaning of the faith that we are following in Islam. And remember, these words is what our beloved Imam said to us. He speaks about spiritual Islam. Our beloved Imam says, Shia Imami Ismaili Islam. And you will see as we move along why I'm emphasizing that to you today even more so than before, because the notion of hakikat, which is the destination, the manzil, is indeed the recognition of the Imam of the time. And this recognition of the Imam of the time, when it is rooted in the heart, meaning we have achieved the stage of this hakikat, then eventually you come to understand all the other mysteries that are hidden inside the marifat. So please understand this explanation, which is from our beloved Imam, 32nd Imam, Mustansir Billah Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam. And this is so important to make sure that we do not lose our way. Because remember, there are dozens and dozens of tariqas out there, Sufis and Sunnis, Shias and Sunnis, that gives meaning that is relevant to them, is their meaning. But this is our meaning. This is our meaning. So let me stop sharing my screen and then come back to the continuation of the subject. So as stated, that we have that roadmap, and let me add the pieces I wanted to add last week, which I left out. So, and it's always good to give some comparisons so that in this comparison, you can see the stage. But as I do that, let me state one more thing. In the practice of our tariqah, remember, as the Ginan stated, and as the roadmap given to us by the Holy Imam also implies, the notion of the Shariat is integrated in the tariqat, and whatever is in the tariqat, if you reach the stage of hakikat, it is integrated in the stage of the hakikat. So if you take the Shariat to be the law, your behavior, your identification in society, your connection with yourselves and society in general, and how that should be guided, which is part of the Sharia, then that Sharia also is explained, defined, and identified by the Imam of the time for the Jamaat. So don't go looking here and there, thinking now you can go to some other source and extrapolate Sharia there and start thinking that, this group speaks about Sharia in this way. That group speaks about Sharia in that way. No, that is not what we do. Do you see the roadmap? The roadmap says the ultimate purpose of the Sharia introduced by the Prophet was the haqiqat, the batin, the recognition of the Imam of the time. So let me ask you this. If the ultimate purpose of the Shariat was the haqiqat, the recognition of the Imam of the time, then where does that recognition begin? That recognition begins right at the level of the Shariat, meaning in Ismaili Satpandaram, in the practice of our faith. And please read the preamble of the Constitution that will give you, in a language that is acceptable and understood and articulated by anyone who would like to read it, that it is the Tawil and Talim of the Imam that lights the path of the believers. So the recognition of the Imam begins at the level of the Shariat. And therefore, we must be in alignment. We must be on the same page. That when our beloved Imam is guiding us in society and as a community of believers in Islam, and how our community is identified, how our Jamaat articulates its position within Islam and society at large. What role does our Jamaat and responsibility the Jamaat has in the outer society, within the Jamaat and outside the Jamaat, in the Ummah and outside the Ummah? Even those parameters are identified, they are defined, and they are directed by the holy Imam of the time. Please say salawat, Allahumma salli ala Muhammadin wa ali Muhammad. Now the point of me telling you all of this, so that we do not fragment, you do not divide, you do not put a veil between one and the other. In our system of following the guidance and the hidayat of Maulana Hazar Imam as the Imam of the time, the Shariat is integrated in the Tariqat, and the Shariat and Tariqat collectively are integrated into the Haqiqat, and eventually the Shariat, the Tariqat, and the Haqiqat collectively are themselves integrated into the Marifat, where we have the higher meaning of the experience that the believer seeks to obtain for its ultimate purpose, which will be something we will speak out next week. So, where do we go from here? Well, having given you this baseline, and I suggest that you keep this baseline in the mind because it will make more sense. So, if you think about the Sharia, and again, I'm giving you these points of connection so that you can see how they are integrated. If you think about the Sharia, then the Sharia makes our outside clean and attractive. So Sharia makes our outside clean and attractive, because those related to how we make our outside clean and attractive. And if you look at the farmans of our beloved Imam and the guidance he has given about the ethics of our faith, then you will come to understand that indeed the Imam has left nothing to chance. He is very explicit as to how we make our outside clean and attractive. Then if you look at the tariqah, so you have the Sharia, then there is the tariqah. If you look at the tariqah after the Sharia, it's designed to make our inside clean and pure. And each of these support each other. Do you see where I'm going with this? So one is entirely Zahir, which is the Shariat, and the Tariqat is partly Zahir, partly Batin. But the Tariqat is the access to the mystical part. So if you look at this extension of definition, that the Sharia is intended and it makes us our outside clean and attractive, and the Tariqah is designed to make our inside, the inside clean and pure. Does that ring a bell? Do you remember Mola Bapa's guidance, and what does Mola expect from the Murids? What is the expectation that Mola Bapa has on us? Do you remember what he said? Keep a clean heart and a pure soul. Keep a clean heart and a pure soul. That is what the Imam has always led us to be and to believe and to be in. So, the idea of the tariqah, which is the mystical part, which is the inner meaning, the inner part, in the tariqat, which is the part of mysticism, and I had mentioned that briefly last time, that this word mysticism comes from the Greek mystes, which means one who has been initiated or brought into the mystical path, meaning one who is in search of the batin, the mystical path. But not only that, but in this part of the batin, there is a very important criteria. And that criteria is the criteria of secrecy and silence. Now I know people have great difficulty maintaining secrecy and especially silence. And you know what I mean. With all the articulation that exists today about the inner meaning of things, you often wonder, where is the promise given by the believers about keeping the batin, the inner meaning, like the heart? The heart is inside the body. If the body is the Shariat, then the way you go inside through the Tariqat, but the heart is inside. And what have we done? We have reversed everything. We have taken the heart out and we have corrupted it. I'm saying that to you because why do you think mystical matters are to be kept private? And people have not kept mystical matters private. Look at what our beloved Imam has said. For centuries, why do you think it's called batin? You know where Mola Bapa has used that word. But instead of keeping that practice batin, people have gone all out and discussed batin matters as if the Imam had given them to open that door and say it. Do you know what are the dangers? Let me say this thing to you while I'm on the topic. If you take any batin matters outside, you lose it. The door closes. You will not be able to reopen that door. So now you have to make a choice. Do you think you can go just to anyone and discuss batin matters? That's why it's called the mystical path. It's the path of mysticism. The search is individual, under the guidance of the Imam. But what are we doing? We have made, instead of making the search personal, which is what in our tariqah is, you have made the search public. And you go everywhere, here and there, blurting about your mystical ideas and your mystical search. This is not what our beloved Imam has guided us to do. No one, let me tell you this with 100% certainty, the Imam has given no one the authority to go and begin to define, redefine, and basically give their own personal opinions and meanings on the search into the mystical path. In our tariqah, that is an individual matter between the Imam and the Murid. Did you not hear Maulana? Don't go out there and say blah, 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 and make this a business. I am sorry that I have to say this to you, but I'm not saying this to you for you to feel negative about it. The fear is that if you have not understood the guidance that our beloved Imam has given to us in our tariqah, are we not speaking about our tariqah? You will not be able to get to the stage of hakikat because you have closed the door. You have closed the door. And it is very important that you understand that if you are seeking to understand your path, then go back to the Imam, meaning go back to the guidance of the Imam of the time, go back to Maulana Hazri Imam's directive and guidance and look into that one. And if you don't have access to that, go to our institutions who are permitted to allow the murid to look into Mullah Bapa's guidance for their own personal search. But be careful of corrupting yourself and thinking that you can just get opinions after opinions after opinions in matters of spiritual search. In our tariqah, the whole idea of spiritual search is that the search first and foremost is under the guidance of the Imam. Under the guidance of the Imam. I repeat, under the guidance of the Imam. So go into that path. Go into that avenue. If you make the mistake of thinking, and I repeat, I'm sorry to be repetitive, that you think people here and there can just give you their opinion, then and their opinion becomes your spiritual guidance, I'm sorry to say, sadly mistaken. You are taking the wrong path. And in making these statements to you today, I am telling you because that is what our beloved Imam has guided us to do. Indeed, Our faith, like Imam said, is a personal faith. It is an esoteric faith, which is the batin, and it is an intellectual faith. But at the level of being a personal faith, what are you doing? Is it personal anymore? You go and discuss things in public about your spiritual practices? This is a great disservice to yourself. Why? Because you shut the door. By discussing your spiritual matters in public, what are you doing? You are telling the Imam that what you told us is not important. Nazubillah. But what others are going to tell me in their opinion is more important than the guidance that you have given us, Mawla. So which path do you want to follow? The path given by the Imam in the Tariqah, or you want to follow people's opinion? Please don't make that mistake. It's a serious mistake. Very serious mistake. Because if the door closes, you will lose the path. Allow the Imam to be the one to guide you spiritually into the path by following the farmans the Imam made. By following the farmans the Imam made. Why do you think that a murid has been asked to practice his spiritual path at a time when most of the world is asleep? When most of the world is occupied with other things, and the one who is searching has been asked to sacrifice the sleep and wake up at that time. And at that time, make that connection with the Imam. So who are you making connection with? Opinion makers? People who take this authority upon them to tell you what is their opinions? For heaven's sake, do not disobey the farman Hazrat Imam made. Look, I have said to you right from the beginning of this lecture, the whole idea is always related, in our case, when we are speaking about the Sharia, the Tariqat, and the Haqiqat, which I'm just getting into it. It is from the Imam, not opinion makers. Not opinion makers. And therefore, learn to differentiate. Don't go here and there. Don't go just any way you think, because you can just express what you think that you want to say about your spiritual practice and allow opinion makers now to add their own spices and sugar and salt into what the Imam is already given. Do you think what Maula Bapa is given is not sufficient? That he did not make it clear? If you did not understand what the Imam has made it abundantly clear, then go back and read what the Imam has said. Then you will understand. Please don't make the mistake of going into these opinion makers and givers. Because the mystical part, as I've just explained, which is part of the tariqah, is initiation. You understand the meaning of initiation? Initiation means you went to the Imam and said to Maula Bapa, guide me. Please, Maula Bapa, hold my hand and take me into this path. And Maula Bapa said, are you sure? Are you sure you want to come here? Because you can leave. And you said, Amin Khudawin, Maula Bapa, I want to be here. I want you to guide me. Then Maula Bapa said, okay, if you are going to be here, then the Imam will show you that path. Is it not what you made a promise for? And now what do? Now you go here and there and everywhere and open up the bundle of your issues and make that public. Was that a public gathering that you went into? It was a very sacred and very important gathering whereby you went to the Imam and said, Mawla, help me and open the path for me. The path. And that is the path of the tariqah, that the Imam opens up the inner part of this mystical quest and search. And therefore, we call this tariqah the path that's taking you to the hakikat. Now, I'll come back to the path, but let me here add a few things about the hakikat, because that is the area today. But I have to re-emphasize to you, if you make the mistake of discussing your personal spiritual matters, and you know what I mean by that, then the door of the hakikat will close. The entry into the stage of hakikat is not an academic entry. It is an entry that is dependent on the grace and mercy of Hazar Imam, on the murid, on the mu'min, on the faithful. Because we went to the Imam and we said to the Imam, Mawla Bapa, please guide me, show me the path. I want to elevate my soul. And Mawla said, if you want me to do that, then come into this path. So whose path are you following? Be very careful. You know what they say. It's like a medication that is vacuum sealed. And when you break the vacuum, you contaminate that medication. It has now no longer any value. So what are you seeking to do? Are you contaminating the path that Imam said that he is showing us? Follow strictly the path that Imam is showing us. So what is the hakikat? The hakikat means the inner reality, inner batin, inner reality, the supreme truth, the esoteric truth. The believers who are seeking the hakikat, if they are admitted to the stage of hakikat, and if Mawla takes a believer, a murid, a mu'min into the stage of hakikat, that murid, that believer will be shown the truth of how things really are. That is to say, the believer sees things as they truly exist. The supreme truth, the divine reality, the path of truth. Do you see why in the tariqah the Imam says, keep a pure heart, keep a clean heart and a pure soul, keep a clean heart and a pure soul. Without that, you cannot get to the path of hakikat. So this divine truth we call al-haq is what our beloved Imam, as the Imam of our tariqah, takes the believer into that path. So let me say a few more things about the notion of the haqiqah. Remember the meaning. It is the supreme truth. Don't lose that meaning. We're coming back to it in a second. So if the haqiqat or truth is what it is, the supreme truth, it refers to the inner meaning of the practices and guidance which our beloved Imam is defining for us. And as Sayyid Muhammad Shah said in the Ginan, that it is at the level of the Shariat, you identify this recognition of the Imam, and then go into the tariqat where the Imam holds your hand and where you say to the Imam, take me to the path of spiritual enlightenment. Then we are guided by the blessing, by the grace, by the mercy, by the compassion, by the love of the Holy Imam into the stages of Hakikat. It is the stage where Mola Bapa seeks to give us direct experience of mystical truth. Direct experience of mystical truth. Because remember one thing, without this direct experience of the mystical truth, without this experiential understanding, we are simply following everything blindly. Where, you know, the word that's used often is taqleed. It's blind following. And I'm going to give you the reference in how our beloved 48 Imam Sultan Muhammad Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam explained this thing to us in very pointed language. So the idea is to attain this station of Hakikat can only be from the Imam of the time in our tariqah. And I will say a few things more in a second. So the attainment, the reaching of the Hakikat confirms and solidifies the practices that are integrated into the first two stages of the Shariat and eventually the Tariqat. So if you like, the Hakikat brings it all together, but with proof and experience. Otherwise, it's simply imitation. You are just imitating day by day. You may be imitating yourself. You are imitating others. Now, let me say one thing to you. When we are speaking about the tariqah being our path that is leading us to the hakikat, what is that path? That path is defined, again, I say, defined by the Imam. So I am using the definition given in our tariqah by Holy Imam Shah Mustansir Billah Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam, our beloved 32nd Imam, when the Holy Imam says, "O believers," please listen to this carefully. "O believers, the path to God, Haq." Now, you see the word Haq is referring to Hakikat. The path to God, Haq, is the straight road, the Sirat al-Mustaqim. First point of connection. If Hakikat, as I explained a second ago, is the notion of experiencing this divine reality, then our beloved Imam says, that is the path to God, Haq. It is the straight road, Sirat al-Mustaqim. What does that mean? The Holy Imam further explains and gives this meaning, and he says, this means the recognition, marifat of the Imam of the time. Please say salawat. Allahumma salli ala Muhammadin wa ali Muhammad. Marifat, which is what we will delve with next week. But here the Imam is giving the point of connection. Then the Imam says, so far as you can, try by every means to follow the right path in order to attain the goal of truth. Hakikat is the goal of truth. So when you say to yourself, Hakikat, you already know the meaning from the roadmap, which is the recognition of the Imam. And the path of recognition is the Sirat al-Mustaqim, which is the straight road to God, which is the recognition, the marifat of the Imam of the time. And then the Holy Imam says that his leadership, meaning Maula Bapa as the head, the leader of all levels, from the material to the marifat, his leadership is the right path. And then the Holy Imam says, so far as you can, try by every means to follow that right path in order to attain the goal of truth. Manzili hakikat. When Nayab read that roadmap, did you see the word manzil there? Same. Manzili hakikat, which is the recognition of the Imam of the time. Please don't go to opinion makers. Their opinion is their opinion. May God bless them for that. Our path in Satpant, our path in Ismaili practice of Shia Imami Ismaili Islam is the leadership of the Imam of the time. Let me explain that to you in another way. Let me just finish what the Imam says. The Holy Imam says, strive. Do you understand the meaning of strive? Make an effort. Commit yourself to it. Don't give up. Make sure that you are into this path. The straight path, the straight road of the Imam, the Sirat al-Mustaqim. Strive to perfect your devotion and faith. Deen wa Iman, devotion and faith. Deen wa Iman. At every moment of your existence, whatever age that you are when you are young, to whatever age that you are when you are older, never leave that path. Deen wa Iman. So that you may achieve, the Imam says, you can arrive at the coveted spring of water. That is the notion of salvation. Now, let me add here something of an explanation about the path of marifat, the path of hakikat. Look at the roadmap our beloved Imam has provided us. You remember the roadmap? The ultimate purpose of the Shariat introduced by the Prophet was its inner meaning, meaning the hakikat, meaning the recognition of the Imam. Now, let me ask you this question. Have you thought, have you reflected? The path that we are following in Islam. Please understand this in the most positive way, because this is so significant that, again, if we miss the point, we will miss the road. You will miss the objective. So what path are we following in Islam? Now remember, there are many paths in Sunnism and many paths in Shiism. But in Islam, we are a tariqah and we are a batin tariqah. Which is this path? This path that we, in the Shia Imami Ismaili tariqah we are following, is the path of the Holy Prophet and Hazrat Ali sallallahu alayhi wasallam. And it is this path, this straight road to God, this straight road which is the Sirat al-Mustaqim, which the Holy Prophet had announced that Muslims should follow. And you know the reason why there was a split in Islam. And Maula Bapa has made that very clear. History is making this very clear. There was a split in the path of Sirat al-Mustaqim because there are those who did not recognize the imamat and they became Sunnis. And there are those who recognized the imamat, and during the time of Hazrat Ali, they were the Shias. So which is the path the Holy Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam asked the Muslims to follow? Did Allah not say in the Quran to the Holy Prophet, O Muhammad, declare to humanity that which was entrusted to thee, and if you do not do so, then your mission would remain incomplete. And that act by the Holy Prophet in Ghadir Qum was to tell the whole Muslim world and mankind by extension the holy imamat of Maulana Murtaza Ali sallallahu alaihi wasallam, who is the bearer of the Noor of Allah, meaning Maula Murtaza Ali is that path, straight road to God. He is Sirat al-Mustaqim. And if the Sirat al-Mustaqim implies that straight road to God, as defined by the Holy Imam, then the Imam himself, by this definition given by the Holy Prophet, the Imam himself, Maula Bapa himself, is the Hakikat. He is the supreme truth. And if your goal in the search, in your spiritual search, is to achieve this supreme truth, the Hakikat, the Manzili Hakikat, the goal of truth, and achieve the understanding of the supreme divine reality, then let me say this to you. Who else but the supreme truth can take you to the supreme truth and to that supreme reality? Is there anyone else? That supreme truth, that supreme reality, that Hakikati Manzil, Manzili Hakikat, that straight path to God, that Sirat al-Mustaqim, is Maula Bapa himself, who is Allah's Noor. He is Allah's Noor made evident and present into this material plane. And only He can take us to this batin, to know the supreme reality, to know the inner reality, and to show to the believers the supreme truth as it is. Because He is alone. He is the one. He is the absolute with a capital A that can take you and show you and make you experience, because that is His reality. It is the Imam's own reality. And no one can deny that fact in our tariqah. So, that is the path the Holy Prophet asked us to follow. That's why the Shariat was introduced. So we are not concerned about other people's meaning. Their Shariat takes us to their path. Alhamdulillah, we respect it. But we need to know ours. We need to know ours. And make sure, absolutely make sure, we don't have opinion makers to define our path. Our path is the Imam. And he defines for us, he shows for us, and we are 100% dependent on Maula Bapa's mercy, rahmat, grace, and Maula Bapa's love to show us this path of Hakikat. This is why this path of Hakikat, is foundational into our tariqah. And you know from the very beginning, how are the murids addressed? We always say, Hakikati Mu'min, Hakikati Mu'min. Are you Hakikati Mu'min? If you are, Alhamdulillah. Think about this term. Our whole tariqah, our whole faith is rooted in hakikat, meaning this supreme truth, this supreme reality, this inner reality that we are all in search of. So let me ask you this. Where do you think you are going to find the knowledge of this hakikat? Is there a particular book in the library? Or somebody out there who's going to tell you that, oh, let me tell you about the hakikat? Is there? Let me tell you this. Besides Mola Bapa and besides the peer, no one, absolutely no one has the knowledge, access, and the ability to give the understanding, the explanation, and to transmit this knowledge of the hakikat, except the holy Imam and the peer. Who is our first peer? Nabi Muhammad Rasul Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam. Who is our 50th peer today? Mola Bapa himself. Do you see the relationship? Imam and peer are one. Whatever the peer says is from the Imam. And how fortunate we are. How very fortunate we are that our peers have disclosed the hakikat into the ginans. And our other da'is, in essence, have spoken in the qasidas, in the mankabats, in the masnavis. You know, Imam Sultan Muhammad Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam has often said to us, read the Masnavi of Jalaluddin Rumi. And inshallah, one day, if Mola Bapa wills, I'll try to undertake whatever aspect of the Masnavi that would be amazingly useful to us to explore in the understanding of our tariqah. And you know, amongst the Persian, and of course amongst mystics, they say the whole of the Masnavi of Jalaluddin Rumi is the Quran in Persian language. In the same way, the ginans our peers have given us is the Quran in the language of the ginans. Does that make sense? Why we recite holy ginans in Jamaat Khana? Because ginan is that knowledge that leads into liberation, knowledge that leads into freedom. And our holy peers, and remember what I said to you in my explanation about the mystical prophetology of the holy peers. Remember, the peers have the nur in them. That nur that comes from Mola Bapa himself. So the peer and the imam are one. That is why Mola Bapa is peer and imam. Do you see the importance? If Mola Bapa himself is the peer and also the imam, what does that tell us? It doesn't take a rocket scientist to figure out, right? They are one. Mola Bapa is occupying both the offices as one, as the imam of the time. But he's the imam and he's also the peer. Do you remember during Diamond Jubilee, when homage was paid to Mola Bapa? We said, the person saying it was said, Khudavand, Hazar Imam, you are our murshid and our peer. It was said right in front of the Jamaat. That is why I have to emphasize to you today in the strongest possible term. And the reason why this subject is important is to always understand you will not find the meaning of hakikat here, there, and everywhere with opinion makers. Hakikat only comes from the source of hakikat. The source of hakikat is the holy Imam and the holy Pir. No one has access to this hakikat except the Imam and the holy Pirs. And in our tariqah, as we live in the 21st century, it is the Imam of the time who guides us to the path of this hakikat. And we have been told by the Imam, recite Ginan, maintain Ginan, preserve the Ginan. It is a unique tradition. When Imam says unique, I'm sure you can understand where this comes from. Unique means it is by itself, irreplaceable. There is no substitute. It's unique. And it is to be preserved for generations yet to be born. Because with Maula Bapa's grace and mercy, with Maula Bapa's guidance, with Maula Bapa's inspiration, it is Maula Bapa himself who has inspired the Pirs spiritually through the Nur to give the knowledge of the Ginans, which is the knowledge of the Hakikat, opening the doors of Marifat. So Hakikat is so important to us, meaning that if you say to yourself, I want to learn about Hakikat, I want to know about Hakikat. And remember what is Hakikat? Do you remember? Recognition of the Imam of the time. And who are the Pirs? The highest in creation. And what is the function and responsibility of the Pir? To explain and give this recognition of the Imam to the Jamaat and to the one who seeks it. So what kind of recognition the holy Pirs have given about the Imam, the knowledge of the Imam? Because remember one thing, once you understand and you have the recognition of the Imam, you will have the knowledge of the whole cosmos, the whole creation, the knowledge of. Now, let me take you back to that original hadith. Do you remember the hadith? The Holy Pir says, God says, I was a hidden treasure and I wanted to become known, to manifest. So I created the mankind. For what purpose? So they can gain, they can obtain knowledge about me. Do you see the connection? Recognition of the Imam of the time, knowledge about me. Make that connection. This is the meaning of this Hadith Qudusi. And Sufis for thousands of years have been digging to find out what is that. Now let me add something which our holy Pirs have declared to us. You see, the Nur says, remember, the Hadith says, God says, meaning the Nur, Allah's Nur says, that I was a hidden treasure. And I wanted to become known. So I created the mankind. So that they may gain knowledge about me. And creation came, and mankind came, and mankind started searching. And this knowledge, let me tell you, was always kept hidden. This Satpant Dharam has existed from that beginning, when the Nur says, I am bringing creation into existence. Since that time, this path, this Dharam that we are following today, the Ismaili Satpant Dharam, the straight path to God, the Sirat al-Mustaqim, the Manzil Hakikat, the search and quest for the supreme truth and the inner reality. It is this path that has existed from the very beginning, because Maula has said to us, Tamaro dharamche te anaptikati aveloche. From the beginning of times, when creation first came into being, this dharam was there, this path was there. Of course, there were different names. And Ismaili faith, we call it Ismaili today, but this Satpant Dharam existed when, even as we identify today the paths of manifestation in various centuries and historically, we see and we know through our scripture that when religions were into the groups that we academically identify today, the group of religions that were basically naturalistic in its approach, and they were shamanistic into their expression of nature, Ismaili faith was present there too. And when society is involved, society evolved from those groups of religion many thousands of years after. There were the Aryan mythologies. Ismaili Satpant Dharam was also there. And many tens of thousands later, when the Semitic monotheism came, Ismaili Satpant Dharam was there too, as proven by the Holy Prophet. And as the Holy Prophet said, 124,000 prophets and all the scriptures revealed in the world came on the basis and came for the purpose of making open that hadith, the hakikat of that hadith, hakikat, that the nur became manifest for mankind. So you see how far Ismaili Dharam goes. It's not something 1500 years old. It is from the beginning of time. And remember that there is a hadith of the Holy Prophet. Now, I have it here, but in the interest of time, I'm paraphrasing, which the Imam is also mentioned. What did he say? I'll probably bring it in the next lecture. But simply to tell you, if the earth, think about this, if the earth was without an Imam, even for a blink of an eye, the whole earth with its population would perish. This is a hadith of the Holy Prophet. It is confirmed by what the Holy Imam has said in his farmans also. Now think about this. Reflect on this. When did the earth come into existence? Well, if you use modern geophysical calculations, it will say something like 4.3 billion years old and so on, based on geologic and other fossils evidence. But let me tell you this. According to the indications given in our Ginans, the earth is a lot older than what science says today. The point I'm trying to tell you, whether you think the earth is 4.3 billion years old, or you think the earth is older than that, whatever the time frame is, there had to be an Imam. Because the hadith says, without the Imam, the earth would perish. Which means, from the beginning, when the earth came into existence, the Imam had to be there. That means the nur of Allah had to be there. Is this not what the Quran says? Allah is the Nur of the heavens and the earth. So when did this earth come from? When was the earth actually created? And how the Nur manifested itself there? So you see, even our simple logic tells us, by virtue of this information, that Maula Bapa had to be present in the beginning, in the very beginning, when this earth was created. I mean, after all, has the Holy Pir not given us the clue? It says, Jamin Asman, Nur te kak nipaya. It is the Nur of Maula Bapa also who created this earth and the heaven. And if it is his Nur that created, then you can imagine, without the presence of his Nur, there will be no harmony, there will be no order, there will be no peace, there will be nothing except chaos. But his Nur is here. And we know it is here because we have a living Imam. This is the Hakikat. This is the Hakikat of the holy presence of the Imam. And we cannot just simply ignore that and simply get lost into other forms of illusions and delusion and not recognizing this aspect of the Hakikat. So the point about entering the Hakikat, and this was the whole idea when I started by saying, where do you get this knowledge? Where do you get access to this understanding? It's either through the Imam and or the peers, because the peers have been given the authority, the power, and the knowledge, because they have the Nur in them. Ginan bolo nite nure bharya. This Nur is giving you this information. And remember, Hakikat, recognition of the Imam. So understand this in a really Hakikati manner. Okay, so I know it's about almost going 9:30, and we still have one more lecture, and then if need be, we'll add one more. It's all right. But we have the Marifat part next week. So, and we will touch a lot more on the access to that Marifat from the standpoint of the Hakikat, and hopefully we will try to integrate all of that together, which is one of the purpose of these reflections that I'm sharing with you. So let me just at this point say a few things about the Shariat again, the Tariqat again, and the Hakikat, and then we will leave the Marifat for next week. So, you know, when you look at the level of the Shariat, at the level of law, Kanun, that is, at the level where religious law guarantees an individual rights, ethical relations between people, behavior in society. Remember I mentioned that to you in the very first lecture and all of that. So at the level of this Sharia, there is what is known from the perspective of the soul and one's being. There is this expression from mystics that says at the level of the Sharia, there is yours and there is mine, meaning yours and mine. There is this division, so to speak, which guarantees individual rights, which guarantees the practice of the ethics, which guarantees the identity of individual people in society, and so on and so forth. Then, at the level of the mystical part, now remember, Shariat is the level of the law. The next level of the mystical part, meaning at the level of the Tariqa, or sometimes known as at the level of the people seeking to find this inner reality, call it Sufism, because Sufism is understood to be the spiritual reality of Islam, if you like. But remember, we, as Imam has defined to us before we get confused, Imam says Sufism is very close to Ismailism, not the other way around. Sufism is very close to Ismailism, but Ismailism has gone much further. Okay, so bearing that in mind, and remember, this is our definition. Bearing this in mind, in the level of the tariqah, the path of truth, instead of saying yours and mine, we say mine is yours and yours is mine. Now remember, you have to be in a tariqah to maturely understand what it is. Because at the level of the tariqah, remember, we are guided. This is a tariqah. We are in our tariqah. This is our spiritual tariqah. And in this tariqah of ours, there is no other absolute authority than the Imam of the time himself. No one else. And in that regard, we learn from the guidance of the Holy Imam, and we learn from the teachings of our holy peers in this tariqah, that at the level of the tariqah, we are not yet gone to Hakika, but in the level of the tariqah, we say, mine is yours, yours is mine, in the path of truth. And then there is the level of the Hakikat. And at the level of the Hakikat, what happens? Remember everything I just said to you a moment ago. So I would like you to connect with this. At the level of Hakikat, okay, at the level of Hakikat, the person who is into that spiritual search, call it the mystic, they realize at the level of the Hakikat that all things, everything comes from God. Okay? Very important point at the Hakikati level. Even though we would like to claim ourselves to be Hakikati Momins, but I'm saying to you, take this practically, not philosophically, not academically. Take this to be in real practice, as practice of the faith. Those in the path of Hakikat realize, this is a clue, they realize all things comes from God, and that everything that we have, we are only caretakers on behalf of our Creator. You know, in the path of Hakikat, we, the murids of Maula Bapa, you remember I explained to you the notion of bayat, tan, man and dan. This is what we have done in my last lecture on tariqat. We have given bayat, tan, man and dan. Then we realize that everything we receive in our life, including the air that we breathe to keep us alive, because remember, our relationship from that standpoint starts in the womb of the mother. You remember I explained that to you? That in the womb of the mother, we gave 3 promises to Maula Bapa. Number 1, we will make sure that we return the Mali Wajbat and Dasant. Number 2, we will be Farman Bardari. We will not deviate from the Farman. We will follow the Farman for the purpose of our material well-being and prosperity, balance and goodness, and for our spiritual salvation. And number 3, we will not speak ill of others. We will not slander others. We will not do ninda of others. We gave this bayat in the womb of the mother. So, beginning even there, those who are into the path of Hakikat, they realize that everything comes from Maula. And whatever we have, we are only people who are taking care. We are caretakers of what we possess. And what we possess is actually Nothing. We possess nothing. We are caretakers. We only are caretakers. I'm just taking care of what Mawla has given me. And in that capacity, those who realize this truth, this hakikat, they have gone beyond attachment to possessions and externals in general, including name, fame, position, and all of that. Let me here give you a clue. Do you remember when Mawla Bapa said to us that when you are going to practice your early morning commitment and prayer, what did Mawla Bapa say? What did Mawla Bapa say? Set worldly matters aside. Are we? How many people come out there in the open and basically say things? We can't concentrate. We can't do this. We can't do that. And they start discussing their spiritual matters. Please don't do that. The Imam has forbidden that. Do you not remember the farman? So I'm saying to you, here is an aspect, here is a reflection on the hakikat. So, at the level of the hakikat, what happens? Having explained this, so let me just give you the principal point again, that those who are following the path of hakikat, they realize, and I'm speaking about our tariqah in our ways, everything is a blessing of Mawla to us. The food I eat, the life I live, the blessings that I have, the tariqah I practice, the realization that I have life, all of that comes from Mawla Bapa himself. Mawla and Mawla alone is the one who is the supplier of all of that makes our material and spiritual life worthy. So nothing belongs to us. Everything belongs to him. And we are only caretakers of what we have. On top of that, it's the realization we possess nothing. So, if we possess nothing, then what do we say at the level of the hakikat? Before I say it, let me remind you. At the level of the Shariat, we say, there is yours and there is mine. At the level of the tariqah, we say, mine is yours is mine. But at the level of the hakikat, we say, there is no mine and no yours. There is no mine and there is no yours. Does it make sense? Because it cannot be mine or yours, because everything belongs to him. We are only caretakers. What was the point of me saying this and defining this? By the way, these are definitions, these are explanations, I should say. The great mystic Ibn Arabi makes reference to this. And I have to tell you, Ibn Arabi, although from an external perspective, he is recognized to be, he has a title that has been given to him by mystic. They say he is Tawassul al-Ulama. He is the learned. He is the peacock, rather. He is the peacock of the learned. You understand that expression? And I'm telling you, if you read his work, they're very complicated, but not that complicated, but it takes time. But when you read his work, it is full of Ismaili tendency that tells you, this mystic understood something about the hakikat of Ismailism. And I think he was a practicing Ismaili in veil. Anyway, some other time we'll bring out his work and I will, inshallah, with Mawla's blessing, demonstrate to you some of the mystical aspect that he has spoken. So, if nothing belongs to me, that means, in a sense, I own nothing. I'm just a caretaker. And I possess nothing. So if I possess nothing, and I'm only a caretaker, what does that matter, the material world then? Because my objective is the hakikat, eventually to go beyond the material. Then what happens? Everything remains here. Then you come to realize it was never yours. Look, all you have to do, look at the history of humankind and look at the history of the great kings and emperors and pharaohs into this planet. The pyramids are full of their gold and their preserved mummified bodies and everything they thought they could take with us into the next world. Nada, zero, everything stayed behind. Look at the great kings and emperors of this world who basically were rulers of huge kingdom historically. What happened to them? Everything was left behind. They couldn't even take one red cent with them, despite the fact they thought they owned all of this. Nobody owns anything. Because it says in the Holy Quran, whatever is in the earth and whatever is in the heaven belongs to God. Isn't that amazing? The Holy Quran is so open. He said, whatever is in the earth and whatever is in the heaven belongs to him. It's his. So my point is, in sharing with you this reflection today, is basically to say, are we at that level? We are following a tariqah where we are supposed to go into the path of the hakikat. And in this path of hakikat, the Holy Pir says, in this regard, when he says, no mine, no yours, na go to ayo, na go to JC. Remember that, Ginan? You came in this world naked, without anything, and you will go back that way. You know why this is meant for the Hakikat Mu'min? It is there so that you understand the true nature of attachment. Remember, I want to make it clear to you. Our tariqah, as our beloved Imam has defined to us. Remember, Mola Bapa gives us meaning to us in our life. He said, our tariqah is din and dunya together. They are intertwined. They are intertwined. And also remember, some time back, when Mola Bapa gave blessings to the Jamaat about worldly prosperity and abundance and barakat. And then he said, no, 11 times. And then he said, don't forget the spiritual part. Don't forget your soul. Don't forget din. Yes, there is dunya, but there is din. But they go hand in hand. So if they have hand in hand, and the Imam says balance. So now ask yourself, if you are in the quest, if you are searching in the hakikat, how do you position the material world? How attached are you? How detached are you? Now, detached doesn't mean breaking connection. It means just that. Being without attachment. And what does that attachment mean? So, these external manifestation of the human being's desire about wealth and position and name and fame, if they are in themselves exclusive, they create egocentric tendencies that leads you into the wrong path. But if wealth, name, fame, and everything that is in the material world is recognized on the fact that this does not belong to me, but name and fame is a blessing from Maula into my life, then knowing full well none of this is going to go with me when my soul will leave this world, then our faith says, by all means, have the highest of the education. Get the highest of your name and fame and wealth and positions in society. Get it, use it, make the best of it, always understanding. This is an expression of the soul, and it is the soul eventually will even benefit from these actions, provided we remember these are blessings from the Imam in our lives, and when we exit this world, we realize the true meaning of the Hakikat in a sense that no mine, no yours. Everything belongs to him, and everything will eventually return into him. So I'm going to stop here, and the idea of Marifat will be, inshallah, expressed next week. And then we will see where we go, and we will decide together if we need another session to continue with that. But you can see there are so many beautiful layers of description, and we will go from there. So I'm going to hand back the control to Nayab, and also I see Nusri on the screen somewhere. So back to you, and thank you for being there and facilitating this evening's session with everyone present.
Nayab had a bit of a hiccup in her internet, but I think she's functioning and able to unmute, so she can go ahead.
Yes, perfect. So thank you, Dr. Hassam. We, on this day, November 17th, 2020, we had about 250 participants join, and also join from around the world. So on behalf of all of us, we want to thank you for your generosity, for your time, your knowledge, and for your consistent efforts every week. And we will pray for you now.
Amen.
Ya Ali, Ya Nur Maulana Shah Kareem Al Husseini Hazar Imam. Mola, bless your Vaizeen with good health,
Amen.
with safety,
Amen.
with security and
Amen.
comfort. Ya Mola, bless your Vaizeen with divine knowledge,
Amen.
so that you may share it with your Jamaat.
Amen.
Ya Mola, bless your Vaizeen with success in all of his endeavors,
Amen.
and keep him in your love and your light.
Amen. Amen.
Ya Mola, Sirat al-Mustaqim par Qaim Rak,
Amen.
और मंजिली हकीकत समझ दे.
Amen.
Ameen, Ameen. Thank you, Dr. Hassam.
Thank you, Naya, for your prayer. Shukr Maula. And I reciprocate prayers for you, for Nusri, for all the co-hosts. I had heard Yasmin earlier on, and all other helpers and co-hosts who are here today, and even those who are not here today. And for all the participants, may Mola Bapa bless you with Hakikati Samaj. May Mola Bapa keep you strong in the path of the sound. May Mola Bapa keep you strong, and Mola Bapa make you aware of Farman Bardari. May Mola Bapa bless you with his Noor. May his hand be on your shoulder to guide you, to protect you, and to keep you in the path of Sirat al-Mustaqim and Hakikati Samaj. May Mola Bapa always protect us, so that we may not go away from the path of Sirat al-Mustaqim. May Mola Bapa bless everyone with the acceptance of your tasbihs, your prayers, your wishes, your desires, your endeavors. Mola Bapa always protect you and keep you happy, keep you sound and safe, and whatever wishes you may have, in the Hakikat, Mola Bapa accepts it, fulfills it for you, and Mola Bapa bless you with Zahiri and Batini Didar. Ameen.
Thank you, Dr. Hassam. We only have about 2 questions for you. So at this point, I will announce a exit point for anyone who does want to leave. I know it's a long night for some people. The 2 questions that we have, Dr. Hassam. So one of them is, how do we know that we are Hakikati Momin? Maybe you can elaborate a little bit on it.
Yes, that is indeed the question. And one way perhaps to understand a response to that question is to ask yourself and said, how has our beloved Imams defined the criteria to be in the Hakikat? And how has our holy peers defined what are the criteria to be in the Hakikat? And it's almost like saying, well, I don't want to use this concept, but because there's a question, I'm trying to give you a framework, is to say, well, in a way, here is a kind, and I underline a kind of a virtual checklist. There is this, there is that, there is this, there is that, there is this. So some criteria are there, and we say, am I fitting into this criteria? Am I following the idea and notion of Hakikat? So I know I haven't answered the question exactly to the point because the criteria needs to be identified. But I can say to you one thing immediately from the meaning the Imams and our holy prophets and the peers have given, without going into the sub-meaning. Remember the meaning of Hakikat given by the Imam? Recognition of the Imam. Recognition of the Imam of the time. So the question I ask you, the person asked the question, that how does a murid recognize the Imam? Is it recognizing the Imam? I'm just giving you some quick clues. There are people who recognize the Imam as just a descendant of the Prophet physically. And they say he is a leader of the community, he's a leader in society, he's a leader of a Jamaat. And they use the word Imam in a very literal sense, a leader. Then there are those who says, well, he's more than that because he is Imam. And being the Imam, he's a descendant of the Holy Prophet. He belongs to this very special family. And he has the authority of the Prophet to do this and to do that. So there is that recognition. Then there is another recognition, and that belongs to other tariqas, which sometime we have had the misfortune of bringing that into our tariqah, which has frankly no issue with us. We leave that where it is. And then there is the recognition where, for example, in the Ginan, the Holy Pir says, Nabi Muhammad bujo bhai to tame pamo imam. So our Holy Pir is very distinct, very clear. They say, first of all, know who Nabi Muhammad is. Then you will come to understand who the Imam is. Now, I have addressed that today in my talk to some degree. And in the same Ginan, it says, Shafayat karo Rasul ki. Shafayat karo Rasul ki. That's at Ginan Unshati Ayo. Shafayat karo Rasul ki. Seek the intercession of the Holy Prophet and the peers. So we have farmans. So Imam, the belief in the Hakikat is that you believe Imam is the Lord of the Day of Judgment. He will receive the intercession. It is to him intercession is made. He is not. He, of course, he can intercede for his Jamaat, but he is the Lord of the Day of Judgment. He is the Malik Yawmiddin. He is the Lord of the Day of Judgment. And then there is that recognition. Ale Ali Islam Sharaja, Allah Ye Imam. The Holy Pir says, Allah says, he and Imam are one. There is no difference. So our holy peers, this is the nur of the Holy Prophet and the nur of the peer telling the believers that Allah and Imam are one. Allah is Imam. There is no difference because there is only one nur. There is only one nur. If you look at the nur in its transcendent form, is Allah's nur in the batin. But when that nur manifests itself, and nobody can deny that fact, it is in Quran, Allah says He is Al-Awwal, Al-Akhir, Al-Batin, and Al-Zahir. The nur in Zahir is Mawla Bapa himself. So the Holy Pir says they are not two different beings. One is the Batin, one is the Zahir. They are one. The Zahir reveals the Batin, and the Batin is manifest in the Zahir. Having said that, the question comes back then, if the Hakikat means the recognition of the Imam, and a Hakikati Mu'min means he who will recognize the Imam, and in that recognition, there is the supreme truth. There is no doubt. There is the understanding of the supreme reality. There is the understanding that there is only one nur, not two, only one nur. They are one nur. Then the foundation of the Hakikati Mu'min begins there.
Thank you, Dr. Hassam. All right, so great answer to that first question. The other question, it was a two-part question. So Hamida Appa was asking how to keep our Iman pak as well.
That is a very important question. Very, very, very important question. The Iman is related to our dasand, because dasand is our connection with the Imam. It's like plugging. You remain plugged into the nur of Mawla Bapa with dasand. And when you are plugged into the nur, and the evidence of that plug is your dasand, then Mawla Bapa himself will look after your Iman. This is the equation. The simplest, straightforward, and direct answer in a practical, in a faith-based manner. Because Iman means nothing but love in the heart for Mawla, for the Imam of the time. And this love and devotion for Mawla, the proof of that love and devotion is your dasand. Do you remember the cosmic pyramid of the intellect, where I mentioned dasand is the foundation, and immediately above dasand there is Iman. And that Iman is the result of the dasand.
Thank you, Dr. Hassam. Great analogy. I liked the idea of dasand being the plug to the light. Very nice. Another question we have here is a lot of dua, Ashish, from our participants. Okay. What is the role of intellect to bring the heart in harmony and to be able to access the path of Hakika from Tariqa? So what is the role of intellect?
The role of the intellect, as defined by our beloved Imam, is first of all that the intellect is another facet of the faith. But at the same time, our beloved Imam says the use of the intellect is the proper behavior in society. So when we say intellect and we are saying akal, and we are seeking to connect the bridge between the tariqat and the hakikat, remember that the source of the intellect is the heart, and the experience of that intellect from a spiritual point of view is also the heart. Therefore, the bridge, in a sense, is just that coin that has two sides, and that is that the soul itself, the ruh, the atma, when it expresses itself in that function, we call it intellect. So the relationship between the two is that one is the experiential part and the other part is the discriminative part. I hope in one of my forthcoming lectures, I will be explaining in greater detail this whole notion of buddhi, the intellect. I've said something already in a previous lecture, and the notion of ruh or atma and the notion of akal or buddhi. So stand by, and inshallah we will have a greater opportunity to explore that in deeper sense. But in short, this is my answer.
Very good. This other question is in terms of the flow. So Azmina is asking, do all levels follow one after the other, or are all to be practiced in every single moment continuously?
In our tariqah, as I mentioned in the beginning, the level of the Sharia is integrated into the tariqah is integrated into the haqiqat, and the haqiqat eventually becomes integrated inside the marifat. So depending where the believer is, where the mu'min is. So let me give you an example. If Maula Bapa gives a guidance about our conduct, our behavior, our ethics in society, how do you as the mu'min view that? Do you view that purely at a particular level? Do you recognize the fact that Maula Bapa in the tariqah, in saying that, is guiding us to the path of haqiqat? Because everything we do in the end, and let me give you the connecting point, everything Maula Bapa says, he says, in the end of the day, there is only the soul that is eternal. That means even the things that we do at the level of Shariat and Tariqat has to be beneficial to the soul. So if we have that level of understanding, that level of engagement, then you will know where you fit.
Thank you for that answer, Dr. Hassam. We had one more elaboration, and then I think we will go ahead and call it a night. Azmina is also asking for clarification. Is there a fine line between tariqah and sharia?
It depends who, in a way you look at. In the practice of our tariqah, and I underline the word tariqah, the Imam himself defines the practices of the Sharia in the tariqah. So, in a sense, there is no line, because whatever we do in the context of the tariqah or in the Sharia, in the practice of our tariqah, the Imam integrates it. So that is the talim of the Imam to us. And of course, the ta'wil of the Imam is the one that gives us the greater meaning of where this thing is leading to. So there is no fine line, so to speak. It is integrated in one.
Thank you, Dr. Hassam. I think we will go ahead and call it a night. Just want to say thank you to all of our wonderful participants for joining in from all around the world. Thank you so much for your time and joining us on this Tuesday. It is 10 p.m., so we will let you get rest early too. Any final words, Dr. Hassam?
Mola bless you. Don't forget your Baitul Qiyal if you're in time.
Ameen.
And do not forget, in the context of our lectures now, before, and inshallah in the future, there is no higher form of worship than the continuous remembrance of the name of the Holy Imam. Every breath, every step you take, remember Maula Bapa out of love and affection. and all will be fine. Shukr
Inshallah.
Mola bless you all in every way and in everything.
Ameen. Thank you, Dr. Hassan.
Yali Madat Nayab, thank you so much for being there.
Mola
and
Mani
everything.
Madat.
Yali
Thank you very
Madat,
much.
and thank you so much.
Thank you, Dr. Hashem.